Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you for your patience. And thank you for coming before us today. If I may, go through some of the paragraphs from the submissions. Although they are going to be particular to either the Singtel or the Starhub submission, in truth, there is broad agreement between the two submissions. So in the interest of time, if both of you all agree with the general principles, and perhaps you could record your agreement, we could then move a little bit faster, and we could not take up too much of your time. Now, you've, in the submissions, if I could begin with Singtel, on page 3, 2.2, you've identified yourself as a potential victim of deliberate online falsehoods, that you have been affected by commercial scams and rogue organizations, posts around online communications and misleading information regarding Singtel services. And you're concerned about reputational damage that may result from to a commercial entity. This is page 3, para 2.2. To yourselves as a commercial entity as a result of deliberate online falsehoods. And I would presume that Starhub would have similar concerns about how commercial entities might be affected in a similar way.
Correct.
You've already mentioned that the government has wide powers against licensees like yourselves to order takedowns and block access to deliberate online falsehoods, but that such powers may not exist against unlicensed and foreign platform owners, and that is a similar concern shared across both submissions.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
But I think both of you will take the position that there need not be new laws against existing licensed network service providers, but should there be a new law, any new legislation, these should apply fairly agnostically to all digital platform owners. If I could move to the issue of site blocking, and both of your submissions, gentlemen, have concerns about site blocking as a potential solution to address deliberate online falsehoods. And both of you all have addressed the idea that this may not be adequate or may be impractical in some way. Could you perhaps elaborate on why you are concerned that site blocking is an insufficient tool to deal with deliberate online falsehoods? Perhaps Singtel would like to start?
Today, as a broadcast licensee, certainly we are subject to directions from the IMDA under the Broadcast Act to take down sites, take down content, or to conduct site blocking. We currently do site blocking, but in terms of DOFs, they tend to propagate on social media websites. So when an order is given to, say, for example, if it relates to a certain Twitter link or a Facebook page, actually we have no ability to actually block that particular page or that particular Twitter link. So from a practical perspective, as a licensee in Singapore, we can only block, for example, the whole domain name, facebook.com or twitter.com, which would mean the whole, all access to that particular website would be down. So in order to properly address DOFs, then there would need to be some sort of new legislation or enhancement such that those platform operators have an obligation to take down those particular pages or that content.
Starhub?
I would agree with Singtel. The only comment I would make is that the Minister for Law was earlier talking about actions rather than words. In the case of actions, we block literally hundreds of websites. We have established procedures for doing that. We meet regularly with the Ministry for Home Affairs, with IMDA, to talk through procedures and how that can be done more effectively. So we are active in this area already.
So if I could synthesize that, site blocking is possible, but deliberate online falsehoods spread on social media primarily, and the way that your network service providers function, you're unable to have the resolution to partially block only a deliberate falsehood that's spread on a social media site without blocking the entire social media service.
That's correct. It would be the social media company would actually have to go in and delete the tweet off their platform.
Thank you. If I could return to the issue that Singtel spoke about in its submission about commercial scams, but really the broader idea of how deliberate online falsehoods can pose harm to commercial entities. We've talked in this committee about the harm that it can pose towards our social cohesion, our national security, race and religion. But I think the issue of how commercial entities may be affected by deliberate online falsehoods and the extent to which this is serious enough that we have to do something about is perhaps something we could have a little bit more information. Perhaps you might want to add to what you've already written in your submission.
Yes, we appreciate that and acknowledge that this is well beyond the current focus of the committee. The experience from Singtel has been over the years that various parties of the various platforms, whether it be SMS or whether it be applications like Viber or WhatsApp, and including Facebook, have put in place effectively scams where they make representations either as using the Singtel name or the Singtel brand, or make representations that certain things have been done by Singtel in order to effectively extract some sort of commercial gain from our customers. We only learn of these sorts of things through customer complaints, and there's very little recourse that we can do in order to address that other than address the customer themselves.
Sorry about that. Anything further to add to that, Mr. Goodchild?
We haven't encountered any such cases ourselves, but I could imagine they could arise.
Okay. A few other points. Are your concerns about site blocking and the seriousness with which we have to deal with this also affected by the virality of how deliberate online falsehoods spread across multiple sites and multiple platforms? Is that something that, as a network service provider, you are concerned about your efficacy at handling this problem?
Would be an issue. We can block websites that are identified for us. We do so regularly. The speed with which content can propagate is an issue. Trying to get inside that, the speed with which that is done is challenging.
So?
Yes, we can trace and block even up to individual customer level, but once that individual go out of our system, there's nothing much we can do because there's access to public internet connections.
Thank you very much. Okay, if I could move to the issue of public education. Both of your submissions, Singtel on page 6, paragraph 8.1, and Starhub page 5, paragraph 2.5, you've emphasized the need for public education. But both of you would agree that public education alone is insufficient to deal with the issue?
Yes, we agree. I mean, it's certainly a multi-pronged approach from which public education is just one component of that approach. And we also recognise that already efforts are being undertaken both in schools and certainly the government with its own fact checker and those sorts of things are measures taken to try and educate the public.
So I wonder if you're... Sorry, I beg your pardon. Please, Mr. Goodchild.
My apologies. I was going to agree. Education is very important, but it is only one element of the way of defeating DOFs. Would you both, Starhub and Singtel, you agree that part of the problem with public education is the solution? Some of the facts brought before the committee by prior submissions to do with this fact that the falsehoods, the way that they are crafted, means that they are far more attractive and far more likely to stick in one's consciousness and be understood as a reward rather than the truth. And secondly, that the issue of the fact that the falsity spreads faster and further than the truth for that reason are part of the reasons why public education as a solution is going to be quite challenging.
I think public education is important, but it will not fully address the issues that you explained. I think definitely some false news seems to be more attractive and being spread a lot faster than the truth. And I think just by addressing it through education will not be sufficient.
I was going to say that I am continually impressed by the common sense of Singaporeans, but I would agree that education is only one element of the battle.
Okay, if I could move to the technology companies. Both submissions had quite a lot to say about the technology companies, and I'm sure you've heard quite a lot of what they have said in the prior discussion. Would both of you agree, both Singtel and Starhub agree that with this sort of statement that the business model as well as the services that they provide can in fact be both a cause and a facilitator of deliberate online falsehoods?
Yes, we would agree.
Yes, we would agree also.
And what is your view on their positioning that they will not arbitrate on content? They do not want to be the arbiters of truth, the deciders of falsity. They are agnostic to the process.
I believe because they are a platform that reaches billions of people, and if they claim that they want to be socially responsible, they do have an obligation to contain the doffs being spread. So I think they should be consistent with what is their belief.
Please.
I would agree. The other point I would highlight is the committee has already highlighted that there may be legislation coming in. So it would be a matter for the social media companies to comply with the law. It wouldn't be a matter of them exercising their conscience. It would be a matter of legal compliance.
So just to establish this for a matter of record and also for public understanding, why couldn't that same expectation apply to you as technology platforms? The idea that is it possible, we've argued, it's possible for these large internet companies to become involved in making decisions about the content. It's possible for them to be involved in making decisions about quality. And we have argued that they have chosen not to, but that it may be technically possible. That they need to be part of the solution in a way of how we decide upon what happens to the truth and what happens to falsehoods. Why is it not possible for you as technology companies? I mean, I understand that you're a different type of technology company, but let's establish why you feel it's not possible for you as a network service provider, as a telco, to play the same role.
In terms of because we operate in various capacities, so in the sense of as an access provider, the data that comes through our network effectively is anonymous to us. We purely provide the carriage or the transport service, so customers at home can log into the World Wide Web and access certain sites. We don't have visibility of the actual content in those messages. We only see the address and the destination address, which is why when the IMDA makes a determination that a particular URL or IP address contains prohibited material under the Internet Access Code of Practice, then they will notify us, and then we are able to do a blacklist of that particular URL. But us as an actual platform provider ourselves, for example, I think in my submission I referred to Newsloop, where we're an aggregator of content. We do put in place there, before we onboard, in that particular service we're actually working with 500 partners for content. But in relation to, for example, the Singapore News, before we onboard those particular blogs or those content providers, we actually vet them. And some of the criteria we would look at is, for example, is it a reputable journalist, what their editorial standards are like, what's their history of correcting inaccurate information, what's their ability to take down their content prior to actually onboarding them. And now, having said that, even before an article is published from those, we do have a manual preview facility where we look at that content before it is actually published. And we also have the right then also to bring it down or take it down. So from a content provider ourselves, we do put in measures where we host that content ourselves. And actually, Newsloop, for example, is also a licensee as well under the Singapore regime, so we're bound by the same requirements under the Internet Access Code of Practice.
Yes, I was referring to the side of your business as a network service provider rather than a content creator, and trying to draw the distinction between what a network service provider does versus a content platform and a social media platform. Sorry, Mr. Goodchild?
I was just going to add, I think all of the broadband operators in Singapore particularly Starhub, we offer to all of our broadband customers, fixed and mobile, an internet filtering service. We have a third party who will spend all of their time scouring the internet looking for bad sites, pornography, violence, gambling. They will give us a blacklist and we will make that available to our customers to filter their internet services.
If I could perhaps paraphrase what all three of you have said. As a network service provider, you're aware of the address of the site, the ISP that is being asked for, and you're able to take action at that level, whether it's through third-party site blocking or whether it's the blocking made a request from security services and so on and so forth. And this is a distinctly different process from what happens on the social media content, where they are a single site, and what we're talking about is the different parts of the posts as having content. You as a network service provider do not have sight of content passing from the providers to the users. Because if you did have sight of that content, in a way that would be a very different product offering and service to your customers. Is that a fair characterization of the difference?
That's correct, because social media sites like Twitter and, for example, Facebook have secure and encrypted content. So actually we can't see the content itself or beyond the main URL.
Thank you very much.
Including YouTube videos as well, so we could only see the youtube.com, and beyond that, everything else is encrypted.
Your summary is a very good one.
Thank you. Singtel has had some views that digital online platforms such as Facebook, Google, and Twitter ought to be regulated, whether through governmental or the court's powers. This is your para 3.4, page 4. Would Starhub agree with those views, do you think?
We've publicly said that there needs to be a level playing field between operators in Singapore and those outside of Singapore who provide service to Singaporeans.
And that level playing field would extend to legislation if such was enacted?